Welcome to the Copper State Marching Podcast, sponsored by the Arizona Marching Band Association, AZMBA. My name is Martin Hebda, your Director of Education and Outreach.
I'm Dan Hoffman, currently co-coordinator for the judges for AZMBA.
All right. Today, we're going to be talking about judging. A lot of times people are scared of the idea when they think about, is judging for me? Is this something that I can do? So we wanted to have a conversation just talking about that process and how cool it could be.
Yeah, and I'm really excited. Today we have Brian Murphy, a longtime music director in Arizona, and more recent addition to AZMBA, but has been judging for 2 decades now, I believe. And so I'm really excited for him to share some of his wisdom from his experience. And I'll also chip in here and there as a newer, younger judge and a bit more familiar with what it feels like to have maybe that imposter syndrome when you first begin, and then what the experience is actually like getting into it.
Yeah, Brian, one of my favorite judges. I'm always excited when I see him on the panel, as you, Dan. I think you are one of our best judges in the state. So before we bring Brian on, how about we hear from our sponsors? AZMBA would like to thank our sponsors: the Academy Drum and Bugle Corps, Arizona Cardinals Football Club, The Band Shop, Bravgo Media, Cut Time, DJ Rockwilder, Encore Gifts, Instrumental Music Center, Mac Pack, Milano's Music, Music Celebrations International, Music for All, MVP Apparel, Pieces of Flair, schoolfund.org, Show Dots, UDB, Uplifting Promotions, Vic Firth, and Yamaha. Thank you for supporting AZMBA. And we welcome to the podcast Brian Murphy. Brian, thank you for coming on. I've been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time now. Can you maybe start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your instructing journey, your judging journey, your musical journey?
Sure. I am currently starting my 41st year of teaching. I did 30 years in the public schools and then retired, but it was more of a job shift. And currently I have three different things that I do. I teach at Mesa Community College. I'm adjunct there. I work with Metropolitan Youth Symphony. And then I have a business where I go and do clinician and work and consulting with different groups all around the valley and state. And it involves concert bands, orchestras, but also marching bands, and then doing judging for AZMBA too and ABOTA. And so that's kind of what I'm doing right now. A lot of those different things, really enjoy it. It was interesting thinking about how my journey started. I am old. When I first started doing marching band, it was still back in the late 70s, and our school was in that more traditional mode where we did a new show every single week. So we got to play a lot of different music, which was great, but it certainly wasn't real complicated, and the drill certainly wasn't real complicated. So I started there and then went to ASU, marched there, and got more of that. And then my next direct impact was student taught at Dobson High School in 1985 and worked with that program for 3 more additional years until I became a high school director for the first time. And I was teaching up north in Snowflake. So I taught small town marching band for 2 years and then wound up teaching back at Dobson all through the 90s and did that whole scene. And that was also part of the transition. By that time, people were doing shows, but Dobson was a little more traditional. They had the same uniform that they had had since the school opened. When I first started, we didn't have a color guard. We had a flag line. We had our practice flags and our performance flags, and that was it. And they were actually wearing the same uniforms exactly, except for skirts and boots that the band was. The guard had gauntlets, they had hats, you couldn't see their faces. I'm sorry, the flag line. And so I helped get that transition going where we went from being a flag line into a color guard, different uniforms, equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So began that transition. And I would have changed the uniforms had I been there longer. My predecessor did that. And but it was interesting. I just thinking back how I've seen from that real traditional old school marching band through the more current situation. Began judging in 2005 and have been judging since then in various capacities. This season will be my third season judging with AZMBA.
So cool. As someone from the Rust Belt up north in the Northeast, there's a real strong legacy of marching band, especially in that era that you were marching in. But I never considered what like that historical traditional transition felt like in Arizona. So that feels like another podcast topic for another time.
That would be fun because yeah, it was an interesting journey. It really was. Just kind of being part of that and experiencing, because what I'm experiencing now in 2026 is massively different than what I experienced in 1978.
For sure. And that's definitely something that I want to dig into with you later. But in the vein of just a wild experience, I'm curious. Every time I hear about the beginning of someone's judging journey, it was either they were so hungry to get their first judging job and they really wanted to go for it, or they were so reluctant to do it and they were basically goaded, begged into it. I'm curious if you happen to fall into one of those camps.
In the middle. I
Oh,
was
okay.
I was interested, thinking, but yet wasn't quite I wasn't the kind of person that would like jump toward an organization and say, "Hey, make me a judge." I was approached, I was encouraged, and for me, that made all the difference in the world because that was at least one voice in my head confirming that, yeah, I think you've got the chops to do this. You should give it a shot. And so that was huge for me to get someone else saying, I think you should do this. And that was the real catalyst to make it happen.
For our listeners, what is the caption that you find yourself judging the most?
I'm a music judge, and that's where I just feel most comfortable, where I've had most of my experience, and enjoy doing both individual and ensemble. There's so unique aspects to both.
Right.
Uh, but that's the place where I feel much more comfortable.
And when you started your journey, did you start with, okay, I'm judging music for marching band, or did you do the concert band route where I'm going to start doing some judges training and go through just the music in the concert area and then move to judging
Yeah, I
marching
started
band?
in the concert area. I started in the concert area, and because of that music focus, that helped me when we transitioned to the marching band scene. And that was just it was more of a natural fit for me. I can watch a show and I'll see it and like the what's happening musically and what's happening visually is not lining up. I can assess some things like that, but being able to really give good feedback on how to fix some visual things or GE things is not as automatic for me as understanding the music and trying to figure that way. So I wanted to stay where I felt my strengths were.
Well, that makes sense. So, when you started your marching band judging journey, let's talk about that one. Is it what you expected it to be, or did you like, okay, I want to do this, and then you started it, and you're like, oh, that's not exactly what I thought.
Oh, it definitely was. From what I could understand of it, it's what I thought it would be. The parts that weren't were just, I didn't have enough experience to expect that. Okay. I wasn't shocked by anything. It just made more sense as I did more of it. Um, but just, it was a transition of getting comfortable. And when I first started judging, we didn't do numbers. Everything in the state was more festival based, and let's put them in a box, and give them a rating. And then it was a transition into the numbers and making all that happen. And that is a transition, and there's a unique challenge there, but it wasn't anything that shocked me. It was just a matter of figuring out and really understanding. And that's been so good with the judges trainings and talking with people, just helping the understanding so then I can wrap my brain around how best to utilize all those technical aspects of it.
Do you feel like it was easier to place when it was just in a box versus a number?
Yes, because you could put everybody in the same box if you wanted to.
Right.
I'm sorry. Let me say it differently. You could put everybody in the same box if that's where they belonged.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
It's not where you decide to put them. It's where the rubric drives you to put them. So that there's a little less pressure there. Um, but I do like the specifics that the captions and the numbers, to me, that's another layer of feedback that's meaningful. When I first started, it was Olympic judging. I didn't Olympic judge. Well, actually, no, I did some for a unique situation, but as a director, I had tapes that were Olympic judging. And then to transition to caption judging, I'm like, thank you. There's a more element of specificity that gives you more, I think, valuable feedback. And then I think when done well, the numbers give you valuable feedback, even if it's just content versus execution, understanding how those two go together. So it was tricky, uh, but I think it's very valuable.
So, in terms of talking about feedback, right, and giving good feedback, um, how often do you find that the groups that you're judging, that when they come to critique, they're going to be arguing your number versus appreciating your feedback? Because I think that there's a fear of assigning the wrong number or assigning any number in general that a lot of first-time judges have that makes them leery about starting to judge. And what I think they're missing is how rich those conversations about the feedback can be. So I'm wondering if you can dig into a little bit about what is your experience like as a judge in terms of giving how much the feedback impacts your.
Yeah,
Sorry, guys.
I think I can understand what you're saying. Do you want me to
Yeah,
go with an answer?
Yeah.
go with an answer. Why
Okay,
don't you
all
go for
right,
it?
cool. Well,
Thank you.
first of all, it's really important that the performance and the comments and the feedback, that's what generates the number. Don't do it in reverse. So if you're making those two line up, if what you say and what you're giving them verbally feedback, if that matches with the numbers, then the numbers are okay. You're good. So it's making sure that happens. And I think I've had a few experiences in critique where people have tried to argue the numbers, but it's been very rare, very rare. Um, I love critique. I think critique is one of the most valuable tools. And it's great to have because it's a conversation just like we're having now. And to be able to get that back and forth. And you can also sometimes as you're judging, you don't have time to detail everything. You're making a point and then something else happens on the show and you want to address this thing that you haven't addressed before, but your brain's got thoughts on what you just heard. Well, maybe in critique you can finish that little part. So I really love that part of the feedback. If someone argues numbers, it's real easy just to, okay, let's talk about the show. And then once we tend to think about the show and converse, most people kind of like, yeah, okay, they get it. I remember taking a jazz band to a festival early on in my career, the first time I took a jazz band to a festival, and I got a three. And I was like, what? And then I listened to the tapes and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I took that learning experience from it. And so as the conversations go, I think that really helps that issue with numbers and stuff. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of.
I've never judged at a place where there was a critique afterwards. I'm wondering, is it tough to remember all the shows, especially at a big competition, to where you go into critique and you remember enough about each show to have those conversations? Or do you take notes as
Yes,
you're okay?
very much so. I set up a page and I try to do as much as I can beforehand, whether I write down the group's show title, the colors of their uniforms, or whatever, even the charts that they're playing. So I have some information and I take notes. I mean, there's never enough time to do everything you want. It's so quick. But I always make sure I write something down. And what I try to do is come up with what I think is the biggest bang for the buck. What is going to be most meaningful for them in terms of reinforcing or reminding or try this or something. But I've got those notes, a thing where I can go right to this and say, hey, try this, or this was cool, now do this. I remember a group, um, there they had a lot of subgroups in their show, little small ensembles, quartets, quintets, trios here, there. It was a really cool, and they were doing a great job within their little subgroups. But this group over here wasn't connecting with this group over here or this group back here. And so the idea was, great, you're listening so well. Now open up the ears to get this. And I was able to give them something that I think really helped, because it helped, it started from where they were at, and it gave them a thought to take that listening to the next level. And that's what I had written down on the sheet. I didn't write a paragraph. I just some quick notes to make me remember it. Yeah. It's tricky, but it can be done.
Well, that's cool. And just that sparked another question for me. Do you ever judge a band more than one time in a season, and then when you see them the second time, you're like, they listened to stuff that I said? Like, does that ever kind of happen?
It does. One of the questions talked about, like, why do you like being a judge?
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that came to mind. And that happened last year. I don't remember exactly what school, but I heard him earlier in the season, and I made some very specific comments in two or three areas about some things to work on. And I think I saw him, it was either 1 week later or 2 weeks, not more than 2 weeks, but I really think it was 1 week. And I kind of remembered what their show was the last week, and I'm listening, I'm going, check, check, check. They addressed exactly the things that I talked about. And we got to discuss that and critique. And it was just a real happy time. But it was so cool to see that direct impact, using that information and seeing a dramatic improvement that soon.
That
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's
And that's
awesome.
happened more than once.
That's so cool. That's cool. And
Yeah.
I think just seeing the growth from the students has got to be really cool. They're not your students, but it almost probably feels like they are, because you see them.
Right. Well, and that's one of the cool things about judging. I mean, none of us do this music thing to make lots of money. There's got to be some other benefit to it. And part of it is we're wanting to improve students' lives. And we all have, in whatever capacity, the groups that we work with, our ensembles or whatever. But if you're judging, if it's a big festival, you get to have an opportunity to impact 16, 20 groups potentially on a day, where you can expand your world and watch kids and help them. And so I think that's one of the cool things about judging, is you just get a chance to interact with more kids and share this amazing thing we call music. Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
Dan, you're a judge. Like,
It's true.
and I was thinking about this, is like, I've got you as our visual, judge and things like that. Any feedback from you on just some of the stuff that we've talked about? About the critique, how you feel going into critique, and, some of your favorite parts of it?
I also love critique, like Brian said. I think if I feared it with my life, especially in my first couple shows, my first year, because again, I don't want people to be mad at me. I don't want to have heard that I got it wrong. But it's amazing how if you go in as a judge with a good faith interpretation of what you're watching, and if you can always value the fact that effort has been put into this, no matter what, it can be a not very excellent performance musically and or visually, but just the sheer coordination it takes of getting people onto the field, getting people onto a bus to a show, getting them organized enough to present anything genuinely takes a lot of effort. And so valuing that, but then on top of that, providing information that can be used, that it's not just hey, welcome to your tape, this is all the ways in which you suck. It's more like, hey, I want to make you better, I want to help you get better. And so being able to give that information, and then for people to come and critique and be so humble as to be excited about that feedback they've received, and then to dig into that even deeper, say, hey, at the next rehearsal, this is how I would structure it, this is an exercise you can do it. And it's just amazing how we get to be not just enjoying the shows, but we get to also offer feedback that makes those shows better, not better to our tastes, but seeing what's going on in a program and thinking, like Brian said, what's like the one or two things that if we focused on can make the biggest bang for their buck. And that's cool to make an impact.
Can I throw
That's,
in something else about critique?
please do.
Yes.
The critique sessions I've been involved with that have been the most positive experience going both ways is when the director and or staff come with specific questions. You know, they've listened to your feedback and it's not just, well, what'd you think of my show? We've already told you that, but specific questions. Hey, you mentioned this. Can you clarify? Or we thought about this impacts here, or what do you think about here? There's just, and those kind of conversations are dynamite. And it's also neat when we're together, like it's all the music people, you know, it's individual, it's ensemble, it's GE, because sometimes one of the other judges will say something during that critique time and it tings your brain on something and you add something in. Or it can also, as a judge, especially a young judge, they say something and you were thinking exactly the same thing. You're like, okay, my thinking is correct. So it can be a reinforcement too. But when all the parties go into that critique session, kind of having done their homework, shall we say, man, the critique is so good. Most of the time it's like, oh, we got to stop now. It's not get this over with. It's like, no, I want to keep talking. And that's when it's really fun.
That's really cool. Do you feel like the majority of people come into critique prepared like that?
I'd say about 50-50. It's not as much as I had hoped.
I think that's a place we can maybe grow as a circuit. You know, we can encourage that. I remember in the early years, like 2004, 2005, when I was really involved with the board of WGAZ, we actually talked a lot about how do you approach critique. Critique was kind of a newer thing then, and it
Mhm.
was actually kind of a not a good place. Like we really talked about educating the circuit on how do we do this, because you know you want it to be a positive thing for the instructors and the judges. So
Yeah. And um, as people get more comfortable with it and understand the process and do that preparation, it just becomes a better and better thing. It's very valuable. And a little encouragement, I would really encourage all of the directors to go to critique, value critique. Don't just send your staff. You need to go because if you don't, you're sending the message that maybe it's not that important. And I know things happen logistically. You know, you can't be everywhere at once. But if at all possible, please be a critique. You know, because it's such a good thing.
And I think that specifically with Arizona, I would say 80, 90% of our groups have maybe less than three members of a staff. And so sometimes you only have that one staff member that shows up and it's like, I teach the front ensemble, so there's only so much I can get from you, Vish person. Um, and so to that end, I'm wondering if, Brian, if you have any tips and tricks or if there's any questions that you've heard over the years from staff members that maybe if you can't listen to the tapes beforehand, or if it's you're not representing the caption that you're about to be in critique, what questions can we still glean information from that aren't just things that you just said on your tape?
So you mean questions to bring to critique?
Yeah. So especially if someone listens or even they listen to your tape and they're just like, "Yep, I agree with you on this. I agree with you on that." They don't have questions about what you've said about the show. Are there any other questions that how can we have a dialogue that's useful?
I think maybe um, coming up with, okay, what are the needs of my group? You know, we all, when we're working with ensembles, we have strengths, we have weaknesses. As we design a show, there's strengths, there's weaknesses. So maybe just self-analyzing your own situation and bringing that to the table. Maybe they didn't comment on it, but you're really struggling. We had somehow warm-ups came up, and we were spending some time talking about how we could fix a certain concept within the context of a warm-up. And it wasn't just musical, it was also visual, like now do this so they get comfortable moving their feet while they're doing this. So I don't think it came up specifically on the tape, but they sort of shared a need
Hmm.
and we all just had a great time brainstorming. It was like one of those things like, okay, what do you think? Go. And you had to come up with an answer right then and there. It was fun. And then we all started sort of jiving off of each other. And then people added layers and layers and layers. And that's what's so cool about being together. It's that perspective. You get multiple voices. And so just I think coming with your needs and being willing to ask. It's hard. You could say, okay, yeah, this part of the show is weak. What can I do here? That kind of thing. It can be hard, but it's all good.
Well,
Yeah.
the goal is growth, you know, and
Exactly.
and I think everybody that approaches it that way, we're going to be in good shape. You know, one thing, and I just want to say this right now. I know as band directors, and I've been going to a lot of shows, and you look at who the lineup is. When I see a lineup that has both of you on it, I'm always excited and I'm happy. And it's not because, people say like, do those judges like us? It's not what that's about. It's like, I know that we're going to get a great read and we're going to get good feedback on where we're at. And, and I was going to talk about this later, but since I'm on this now, both of you provide such great tapes that are fantastic for me to share with my students. And I think, and to directors out there, I think that's a good thing because there are those students that they just will dive in and they can't wait to see the tape, hear it, and don't send all the tapes to them. A lot of times I don't do the design type ones, but when you guys give specific feedback on what you hear and how to fix it, I mean it's invaluable, So I think that's great. And Dan, I don't know if I told you this bit, but when I was listening to a little bit ago a tape from last year that Brian made for us, I'm sitting here and I go, I want my students to hear this tomorrow. Like I'm going to play it for them next week because you're talking about all the things that are important. It's a different show. You're talking about articulations. You're talking about the crescendos. You're talking about the balance. You're talking about all the things that really need to happen. And it means so much coming from an adjudicator. So I just wanted to put that out there. I just think you guys are amazing. That's fantastic.
Thank you. That's so sweet.
I, I, I appreciate it. And I also love the fact that you're referring to the feedback as tapes, because when I first started judging, I was literally using tapes.
Mhm.
So,
When I first started band directing, it was tapes too. And it kind of went weird. It was like really fast. It was like tapes to like, they went to like MP3 drives to like CDs or something like, and then it went back in there. Yeah. So yes, I do still call it tapes. That is I'm showing my age on that one as well. That's all right. So here's a big one for me. I've done a little bit of judging in the music realm, and I have my answer for this. And then for both of you, do you feel like jumping into the judging pool made you a better educator in what you're doing with your students?
yes. Do you want me to go first?
Go
Sure.
for it.
Okay, great. Okay, I was really thinking about this question a lot, and I might seem like I'm off topic, but I don't think I am. When I taught at Dobson, I was really fortunate. I team taught three classes, two bands and an orchestra. There were two of us in there, and I taught with an amazing educator, Rich Christensen. And I used to get so frustrated because I'm working the band or the orchestra, and he's hearing all this stuff that I'm not hearing. Well, he made it real clear to me that when you're off the box, when you're off the podium, your ears are so much better. So when you go to judge other groups, what are you doing? You are hearing other groups without having to run a rehearsal. You're practicing listening in a different way. And so that makes your ears that much better. And if they get better off the podium or when you're not running a rehearsal, then they're that much better when you get on the podium. And so it really helps to expand your ears. And to me that just has really helped me a lot. And then it also gets me out of my little bubble, making sure that I'm not in some kind of very limited echo chamber, hearing other voices. And sometimes the other voice, the same sermon, different preacher, and you go, huh? See that before? Or it's a brand new idea. You're like, I never thought of that. And I had that recently with a Copeland piece I was working on. A guest conductor came in and was rehearsing with the group. And I'm like, I never heard that. And I use that in our performance. So it gives you that just more voices in your own head too. Okay. And as I talked about earlier, it just gives you a chance to be in contact with more kids. And we love this teaching thing. And so you're out there connecting with more kids and students.
I agree. When I have a guest conductor in working with my group and I'm, my band hall, watching and observing, I hear so much more. You are so right with that. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it definitely, I feel like I became 10,000% a better designer and instructor. I feel like before I was judging, I had a lot of great high level information. But what I was lacking was that big picture eye, like what actually matters the most at any given moment of a show. And I would so often get in the weeds teaching the most technically difficult 16 count choreography you've ever seen, but it's happening like in the back of the field with a section that's not even playing the melody, that has no association with the melody. And so it's like, I as an instructor, I wasn't really optimizing my time in rehearsal, focusing on the things that mattered most. So judging really helped me prioritize like what things matter more than others. Also, I totally recognize now what people mean when they say that excellence is effective, or that like clean. Like I used to be very dismissive of groups. It's like, well, they were clean, but they were boring. But when you watch 30 groups in a row, if only two or three of them are very, very excellent, that does stick out. And I think to that effect, or to I feel like judging has really enhanced my palate, so to speak. Like I would frame it almost as though if judging was becoming a chef. It's like before becoming a chef, I just like the three foods and tastes that I like. But then once you become a chef, and once you actually have to cook, and once you actually have to eat other chefs' work, you're maybe not loving every taste that you're having, but you're appreciating. You can appreciate what good taste is. You can appreciate what has been made well, and so to that end, it's I've become able to appreciate a whole breadth of marching design that maybe I wasn't giving much credit to before. And it's just cool to appreciate groups on their own terms, especially in Arizona, where there are such unique situations at so many schools in terms of resources and staffing availability. And so to see groups use their, what some might call shortcuts or shortcomings, use that as an advantage and do a show that only they can do, it's really cool to see that and to see that bloom and to give credit where credit is up the due and otherwise maybe not given. So yeah.
I love the excellence is an effect. I was having a conversation last week, I think, with my program coordinator, Ryan Springler. And I was just talking about, okay, well, in this movement, like, what's going to be our thing? And Ryan's like, we're going to play it really well. And I was just like, you're right. Like we don't have to throw all this other stuff there. Like, we're just going to come out and we're going to sound great. And I'm like, and as a director, it's hard. It's hard to like remember that stuff, which is why I've got these voices of other people to bring that into me. But yes, it is an effect. I 100% agree. I think that's great. For both of you, what do you think like one of the hardest parts of judging is?
Mm. Brian, do you have any immediate thoughts?
Yeah, I think wanting to be consistent. In other words, okay, one, I want to give the same focus and energy and passion to every group, whether you're first of the day and there's two people in the stands, or the last of the day and you're just fried, or the sun shining in your face, or whatever it is, being consistent and making sure I'm giving really high quality feedback, and feedback that that particular group needs at that time. What you might talk about in late September is probably different than what you might talk about in late October, early November, and so making, but we have as you mentioned before, the variety of groups in this state. We've got some groups that have large staffs and are well supported by all sorts of different entities, and we have some smaller groups that it's could be one person. And so they have different needs and different focuses. So can I give that band what they need at that time, but also do it rapidly and clearly? Because I don't want to just hyper focus on one thing. I want to make sure that I'm really hitting everything in that caption, everything on that rubric. And then, as I talked about earlier, making sure that my comments and the score line up. They can't be um, disjointed. They can't oppose each other. So those are some of the challenges that I focus, and always wanted to be student centered in everything, making sure that it's about the students and what their needs are.
You do a great job with that too.
Oh, thank you.
Dan?
I think the two biggest challenges for me, one is having every word do more work. That is to say, it's very easy to be so excited that I'm just spitting out words as fast as I can, versus being trusting that I can like slow down and maybe more thoughtfully deliver the 3 or 4 words you need to hear. Um, at the same time, though, I think the message received is that enthusiasm that's through my fast speaking is it's conveying a real will and interest in being as useful and as kind-hearted and as possible. So uh, and it's also part of one of the fun parts about judging is that this is a skill like anything else. You get better at practicing your instrument, you get better at practicing judging. And so year after year to get better at this challenge is really cool. I would say the other thing is sort of being aware of my own blind spots and in terms of my awareness, my unconscious biases. I think it's no um, surprise that I really do value a lot of the more modern, avant-garde sort of performance techniques. And sometimes when it comes to more traditional drill, that's something I'm less versed in terms of speaking about. And sometimes I can gloss over drill and not really give credit to the richness and demand in that construction and performance. So just making sure that I'm adequately and fairly and proportionately giving credit to all the skills on display and not just the ones that feel the most daring.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So here's a scenario. You're going to be watching a band. It could be a band where they have a very high level of excellence, like they're scoring way, 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 way up high. Or there could be a band where there's a lot of areas for growth, right? Which one is harder to judge?
Sometimes when it's high excellence, it can give the illusion that there is less happening or that it is easier because they're making it look easy. Or sometimes, it's excellence, but is it performed well? And I think it's really interesting to find those groups where it is so excellent, but there's just no impact, there's no presence, there's no performance quality. I shouldn't say no, but compared to how excellent they are, it's incredible that it's not affecting me in any way. Whereas it's really fun when a group has a lot of opportunities for growth, but is like ultimately interesting. Like I believe that there is that you can have a soul to an idea, even if that idea is not fully well executed. And so that's where it's fun to help, like, oh, these folks are creative. What questions can I ask them and critique? Or like, what can I say, like, hey, I think you're going for this, but this choice that you've made is sort of distracting me from that. So that is your intention. You may consider how can we either remove, what can we do with that choice that you've made to not hinder, but instead enhance, get out of the way to make this idea even stronger. And sometimes it's helping clarify the idea that creates the excellence. So I think that's a bit more fun and it's easier. But again, sometimes I can overcredit a cool idea and undervalue just how much rigor went into finding excellence.
I find interesting challenges on both ends. I remember seeing a show last year that was the excellence was all across the board. The full ensemble, the soloists, what they were doing musically, there was just it was wonderful. Okay, they still need feedback. And so I'm challenging myself to really dig in and crank up the nitpickiness,
Yeah.
and really, okay, can I give them something to make this better? And that's a real challenge. Um, and then on the other end, all right, so there's a group where they're not being real successful, right? Where's the entrance point? I remember going at a Midwest clinic with Shelley Berg years ago, and he talked about that entry point. Where in that spectrum, where can you start and then take them? And that really stuck with me. And so, okay, where is that point? Where can I give them? And like Dan, you kind of talked about, you're saying, well, you're doing this well. Well, yeah, let's find something they're doing well. And then, okay, now add this to it, or if you just switch this, it's going to make that grow. And so you find what is going to help them. But especially with those young groups that, or I should say young groups, but those groups that are struggling more, if you can find something to compliment them on, something, give them that positive and then layer the comments on top of it. So maybe it's the opposite challenge. I'm trying to find something positive with this group, and I'm trying to find something critique and tweak and adjust with that group. They're both, I find them both challenging, but also both really rewarding and fun.
Just to piggyback off something you just said, Brian, especially when it comes to those groups that are struggling and finding what that entry point is, there are often groups where what I say to them is something along the lines of, your metric of success is not going to be really defined by this scoring sheet, at least in this show or maybe this season. I can tell that you are a first or second year director, or there's something here, you are developing something new. And so, yes, if you look at just the number and if you use only the number to sort of define your success, you'll be maybe a little pessimistic. But I'm using this criteria to give you an honest, objective standard of, or as objective as possible about here's how excellent you are. But I recognize that the choices that you're making are either encouraging the students to buy in, or you are trying to do what you think you're supposed to do in a marching show. You're trying to check off boxes, and then your kids are just not resonating with that. So, how can we let go of these expectations you might have in yourself, and how can you meet your kids where they're at? What is your, as a director, your entry point with your own students, and are you making all the choices you can to heighten their teaching and their coaching?
Yeah, helping your students understand what success means for them. At this point, success doesn't have to be a huge high number. Success can mean we all got on the bus and went there and had this performance and came back with all the mallets we took, just learning how to get there and do this thing and helping each other, or hey, we had a tear and you recovered. Wow, that's success. Because 2 weeks ago, it would have just fallen apart. So finding whatever that success, what success means for that group in that moment. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
yeah, that's great. One thing that both of you do very, very well is you include everybody that's in your caption. Dan, you don't just say, okay, I'm working on these, how are they march? You're talking about the movement, you're talking about the feet, you're talking about the marching, you're talking about the performance, you're talking about the color guard, you're talking about all those visual aspects. Brian, and my staff always love it when they see you there, because my percussion staff, especially because you're a music judge and they're going to get feedback from to their caption, to the percussionist as well. And as we were talking before, that's a big part of the entire music score, and I just think that's fantastic. One thing, and I was talking with Jeff Cuomo a little bit ago, how he approaches it when he's down on the field. He says he does like a number system. He's like, I want to make sure I talk about this section, this section, this section, this section, and he kind of goes through and he's kind of checking it off, and then he gets through and he goes on to the next one. And I think it's just a great technique. One of the things that I kind of would like to have our listeners know is there's probably people that say, I'm not qualified. I don't know enough. I don't think I'd be any good. And any feedback, or any, not feedback's the wrong word, any thoughts that you might have for people that might be, I'm nervous to try something like this. I'm not good enough. What are some things you'd like to say to those people in our state?
I got one.
Yeah.
Okay. Go practice, but not at a festival. We all have colleagues. And so, okay, find a way where you can go and see a friend's show. Maybe you can get to a rehearsal. Maybe you can't because you rehearse at the same time. Or maybe you have a Friday night off and they have a football game or whatever. And just go practice. Do a tape for them and then listen to it together or whatever. Just try it and have them give you feedback on what you said to them. Just try it. It's that old bicycle thing, man. You just got to learn by doing it. Um, and then also seek out good quality feedback from other judges. Um, when I first started judging with AZMBA, I had done very little individual judging. Most of the experience I had was just performance up in the box. And I wanted to be prepared for it. And so I reached out to some colleagues and said, "Hey, can you send me some tapes you received, some really good quality individual music tapes that you received?" And that helped me just to get context. And so it's like you learn to be a good musician by listening, you know? So it's the same kind of thing. So try it and listen, and don't be afraid to get feedback. It's hard. And listen to yourself, just record it and play it back and see how you sound. But just jump on that bike and try it.
I love it. And Dan, before you jump in, I want to piggyback off of one thing that you said there. When we get closer to the end of the season, a lot of times some of my staff will say, we're going to watch this run through from the field. They grab their phone and they make a tape and they say, share this with the students, which I think is, again, another like really cool thing to do. So that kind of supports the stuff that you were just saying there. Dan, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, if you're afraid to start judging, I mean, first of all, that's probably a signal that you have a high standard of excellence and you don't want to get it wrong. And usually that anxiety of not wanting to get it wrong is exactly the thing that's going to ultimately make you better in the long run. And if you want to be good at something, you have to be willing to be bad at it first. I mean, literally, I've had to tell myself one of the ways I become a better teacher is because I always tell my students, I'm not expecting perfection. I'm not expecting you to be excellent. Some of you, you're not going to have a straight leg by the end of the season, but that's okay. That's not where you're going to, like, I want to see you grow. I want to see you change in some way. And recognizing that we can change, that we can grow, getting out of that fixed mindset of I'm inherently bad or inadequate, but allowing ourselves to say, I'm maybe bad now, or I'm mediocre, I'm unskilled, as perhaps the Buddha would say. But ultimately, this is a practice you get better at, and it is satisfying to get better at it. And quite frankly, I don't think most people are as bad as they think they are, especially when first starting out. And again, at the end of the day, if your people can sense whether your heart is in the right place. And even if your feedback isn't the most world changing, um, just trying to get it right, that message will be received by staff and directors. And then over time, your excellence will match your heart. So, yeah.
I
And
love
another opportunity, Martin, going off of what you said, you talked about how late in the season you do a run through and all your staff does recordings.
it.
How
Yeah.
cool would it be in all your free time that you have is to gather the staff together and have everybody listen to everybody else's recording? Gather over some food and appropriate beverage and just talk about it. I know I was at the AZNBA training, I think it was through the Winter Guard. There was training we had
WGSE.
last year. Those two were phenomenal, but they had people in the room practice. They were showing a group and we would say things in front of everybody else. And part of you is like, I don't want to say a thing in front of this crowd, but it was so good, and just being able to share and experience. And even if your staff isn't going to become a judge, that helps them be better with the feedback they give your students. And maybe if you're thinking about being a judge as a director, you do it and you get feedback from the staff. So it's just more opportunity to practice.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm telling you what, time has just flown by. But this conversation has been fantastic. And I have coming up, I want to do a podcast where we're talking about what do the sheets mean, for staff, and then how to like some feedback. How can you approach technique, Dan? I'll talk to you about that one in the future because we haven't talked about that yet. But I'd like to have that go out maybe before we start doing our competition series. So staff says, hey, what are some things that I can do, especially some of our younger staff. But I appreciate you coming on. I'm wondering, do you have any shout outs that you would like to give? We'd like to give our guests an opportunity to throw some shout outs out there to people.
Dan, you're up.
Well, in the context of judging, I would like to give a shout out to Wardell King for reaching out to me back when the moment he found out I wasn't going to be teaching indoor anymore. He's like, "Great, you're judging." I was like, "Okay," and that just nudge into the deep end really helped. And I also want to give a shout out to Austin Green. He is, I believe, living in North Carolina. He works for the Bluecoats on their visual staff, but he came out for a WGAZ judges training a couple years ago, and his information was just so sublime and really inspired me to move and judge and teach at the next level. So shout out Austin Green.
My shout outs are going to be more general. And I'm not getting paid for this, but I want to give a shout out to AZMBA just overall. It was not around when I was a director. And so I didn't experience it from the director's end. I've only experienced from the judging end. But as I'm watching it grow, I see so many decisions that are made that are student focused. This is going to make it better for the students, make it better for the directors, but it's so student focused. And that just brings me such joy because soapbox here, a lot of times administrative decisions are not student centered. And so that student focus, but also I've met so many wonderful judges and they are so uh, friendly and willing to share. I had a judge at a festival last year say, "Hey, this is a great, there's a computer program for keeping track of numbers. Here, use this. Here's the link." You know, just people are so giving. It's not like I've got my secret and I'm going to hold on to my secret, so I'm a better judge than you. It's everybody is so willing to share. And I feel that's because they want to do what's best for kids. But it's just a great atmosphere. I felt very welcomed. I feel like the new kid on the block in terms of AZMBA, but I feel very welcomed.
Well, fantastic. Thank you both for this conversation. I want to say best of luck to both of you as we go into our season, and you've got your judging that you're going to do both in AZMBA and out of state. I know both of you guys are going out of state, and I mean, I just really appreciate the time. So thank you very much.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.